Hi everybody, welcome to Old Timer Noob Plays GMT Silver Bayonet. Today I'll be playing through Scenario 5, A Walk in the Sun. This is the third scenario in the suggested scenario sequence for learning the rules incrementally. There's a low counter density for this scenario, but it will be a little more involved because we have a few more units on the board. We'll be attacking more than one hex, and we have a headquarters unit on the map, which adds a new mechanic to the game. So before I talk about the headquarters unit, let me revisit zone of control because zone of control does have an effect on using the headquarters for attack coordination. All of you who are familiar with the modern wargaming are familiar with the zone of control. That's a new concept to me because, as I mentioned before, I'm an old squad leader player and there was no such thing as squad leader. So for those of you who aren't aware, almost every unit in the game projects a zone of control into the 6 adjacent hexes. I say almost all the units because there are some that don't. So in this game, those units which don't project zone of control are denoted by the white border that you see here. So patrol units, headquarters units, the hospital unit, hidden unit markers, artillery units, and any unit under a fatigue marker do not project a zone of control into adjacent hexes. Remember to find out which hexes can have a zone of control projected into them. You just look at the train effects chart and you see that the train effects chart has a column labeled zone of control, and if you look down that column it will indicate to you if that particular terrain type can have a zone of control projected into it. So all the ones that say no obviously cannot have a zone of control projected into them. Motorized units in the game, a little bit different. These are the ones included in the game. The counters across the top are the NATO symbol for the ARVN motorized units, and the 3 counters directly below that are the same unit with the silhouette counter, so you can use whichever set of counters you prefer for the game. Then below that you have the supply unit and an FWA motorized unit. All these units, if you notice, they have their movement value superimposed on a white oval, which indicates that they are motorized. Motorized units only project the zone of control into hexes into which they can move. So if we go back to the terrain effects chart, you'll see that these first, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, the first 8 terrain types, they have this little symbol here, and if you look over here it tells you that that symbol indicates terrain which motorized units may enter. So those are the only units they can project a zone of control into, the hexes they can enter. If they can't enter it, then they project no zone of control. So now that I've covered that, let me go back and talk to you about the headquarters unit. The headquarters unit has the capability of providing attack coordination for attacking units. And the way it works is if an attacking unit of the same side, of course, is within the command range of the headquarters unit, and that command range is denoted by this superscript 3 in this case. If the attacking unit is within the command range of the headquarters unit, that unit can use the headquarters efficiency rating to roll for attack coordination instead of the PAVN nominal value of 3, which is indicated here. This is what we've been using up to this point. With the headquarters unit on the board, we can now roll against the 6 instead of the 3. There are, of course, some restrictions. When you're using the headquarters unit this way, the rules say that you have to be able to trace a path from the headquarters unit to the attacking unit that is free of enemy units, and it has to be free of enemy zones of control. So in this example that I've got here, the Alpha 866 PAVN unit is only 1 hex away from the headquarters unit. There are no intervening enemy units or enemy zones of control. So he would be able to roll against the headquarters efficiency rating for attack coordination. This unit down here, Charlie 866, could not. And the reason he can't is because the headquarters unit is unable to trace a path that is free of enemy zone of control. This hex right here is a projected zone of control from actually both of these units. So since I cannot trace a path without going through an enemy zone of control, this unit would have to roll against the nominal value of 3. If I had these units in here though, Their presence would negate the enemy zone of control, and now this unit would be within command range, and he could use the efficiency rating of 6 to roll for coordination. At least that's my understanding of the rules. If I'm wrong, let me know. I could be. I've been wrong before, and I'm sure that I'll be wrong again, but I think I understand that rule pretty well. Just the same though, if you disagree, let me know, and why. I'll go back and check it out. So here's the scenario. Let's take a look at the scenario card and see what's going on here. All the units have been placed on the board. The card indicates that the first player to move will be the PAVN player, and his turn begins with the combat resolution phase. Let's take a look at the special rules. During the PAVN, or during setup, the PAVN player marks each of his hexes with assault and or maneuver markers. The PAVN must attack both FWA setup hexes on game turn 30. So you see we have 2 FWA hexes. The PAVN have to attack both of those hexes during his first turn. The PAVN player ignores terrain DRMs and receives an additional -1 die roll modifier to all combat die rolls, including efficiency checks, in the PAVN player turn of game turn number 1. Victory conditions are determined as follows. The FWA player receives 1 point for each PAVN step destroyed, and the PAVN player receives 2 victory points for each US step destroyed. Whoever occupies the hex with landing zone Albany in it at the end of the scenario gets an additional 3 victory points. So that's this hex right here. So I've already placed the assault markers for the PAVN player, and notice that we do have the option of conducting maneuver attacks or maneuver combat, but the number of attack strength points that we have available in these hexes isn't sufficient to have a favorable odds ratio for maneuver combat. So we're just going to be doing assault combat. Now we do have 2 hexes to attack, so this scenario will be a little bit different from previous scenarios because we're going to do all the combat resolution for this hex, which means that we'll go through all these steps like we've been going through. And once all this combat has been resolved, we'll move on and do the same thing with this hex, starting with, again, with the combat resolution phase. So it's going to be a little bit more involved, but same sequence of events. Also for this playthrough, I'm going to be using the provided air points tracking chart. This is a separate player aid to keep track of the FWA air points, because you don't have to use them all at the same time. So for game turn 1, I don't have to use all 10 points in one attack. I can split it up any way that I see fit. I can do 2 points now and 8 points later, or however I want. So I'll just keep track of that with this air points marker over here on the air points track. I'm also going to use this track to keep track of the victory points, just because it's easier on Vassal to do that. On the main mat board for the hard copy of the game, there's a separate game information track that you can use to keep track of victory points and other things, but I'm going to keep track of it here. All right, let's take a look at the units that we have here. The PAVN player has a mortar, 2 reduced units, and 1 headquarters unit up here on this hill. In these other hexes, we have 2 full-strength units, and these are North Vietnamese regular army units. Here we have 1 reduced and 1 full-strength unit, and in this hex we have another reduced and full-strength unit. And the American player has 2 full-strength infantry companies in each hex. So the play is going to begin with the PAVN player, and he's going to start with the combat resolution phase, which is down here, combat resolution per defending hex. So we're going to do the sequence that's coming up for each defending hex, starting with this one. Right, attack coordination. Since this unit or these units are within the command range of this headquarters, which has a command range of 3, we can roll against the headquarters efficiency rating of 6 to see how well coordinated our attack is. Well, let's do that. Roll a 10. Not a good start for the PAVN player, because as you know, if you roll greater than or equal to your efficiency rating plus 2, then maneuver combat's canceled, there's no support allowed, and the defender gets to pick 1 stack to conduct the assault. Now in this case, there's only one stack assaulting anyway, so that's going to be the original stack to do the assault. But the attacker is going to add 1 to his die rolls, and the defender will subtract 1. Remember, on this game turn, the PAVN player also gets to subtract 1 on his die rolls for all combats. So the net is going to be 0. Right, +1 for the uncoordinated attack and -1 for the special rule. So now that we've determined attack coordination, or lack thereof in this case, we'll move on. There's no maneuver combat, so we go to the assault combat step. The first segment is the defender allocates and resolves air and or artillery. Well, I think the FWA player in this turn is going to allocate 4 air points for defensive bombardment, which will leave him 6. So I'll move this marker to here. Now, the FWA player would need more than 4 steps adjacent to the target hex in order to conduct air defense fire. He only has 4, that's not enough, so there's not going to be any air defense. That means that the FWA player can use all 4 points for defensive bombardment. So let's go to the bombardment table. None of these modifiers is going to apply. So we'll roll a 7, and we're going to be on the 4 column. And that is a 1. Now we're going to take that 1 and divide it by the terrain defense value of the attacker. And remember, for defensive bombardment, the TDV is always 2. So 1 divided by 2 is a fraction, which means no effect because we drop all fractions. The next step, the defender rolls first on the assault combat table and applies DRMs. Well, the defender here has 8 defensive strength points available. That's the number in the middle, the number 4. So we have a total of 8. Let's go to the assault table and let's see if any die roll modifiers are going to apply. There's no leader, so that doesn't apply. -1 if the attacker is uncoordinated, which he is. There are no patrol markers and nobody's fatigued. So we get to roll and subtract 1 from our die roll. Rolled a 9 on the 8 column. Subtract 1, that's 8, and that is no effect. Now the attacker rolls on the assault combat table. So the attacker has an attack strength of 7. So we'll go to the assault table. We'll be on the 7 column. Let's see what applies for modifiers. This doesn't apply. No hidden movement markers. The mortar section is not ambushing. We don't have more than 2 hexes attacking. There's no armor. +1 if uncoordinated. And +1 for terrain effects. So the FWA player is in a light jungle hex. Oh, but we're not going to use terrain DRMs this turn. So the PAVN player is +1 for being uncoordinated and -1 die roll modifier per special rule, so net 0. So rolling on the 7 column. Rolled a 9, and that is no effect. So the next step is, if units on both sides remain, both sides roll against the highest efficiency rating in their stack. For the PAVN player, that's going to be a 6. For the FWA player, that's also going to be a 6. Let's roll for PAVN first. And he made it. It equals his efficiency rating. Let's roll for the FWA. He also made it. He rolled below his efficiency rating. That means that both sides can engage in another round of assault combat. This combat is simultaneous, so I'm just going to roll for both sides and we'll apply the losses later. Right, we'll do the attacker or the defender first. That's the sequence. So the defender has a total of 8. We'll be on the 8 column. We get to subtract 1 because the attacker is uncoordinated. We rolled a 10, -1 is a 9. That is no effect. For the PAVN player, total attack strength of 7 and net modifier of 0. You rolled a 2, and the 2 is 2, so the FWA player suffers 2 step losses. So both units are going to take a loss, and the PAVN player gets 2 points for each US step destroyed, so that's going to be 4 victory points for the PAVN player. Alright, so all the combat for that first hex has been resolved. So now we move on to the second hex. Now they have provided a tile spacer marker in the game here, so we can mark this stack as being complete. This combat is resolved. Now we're moving on to the second hex, and we're going to go through the same procedure, starting with the combat resolution phase for the PAVN player. Right, the combat resolution phase is the attack coordination phase. So here we are. We're going to have to roll against the PAVN nominal value of 3 because this unit is more than 3 hexes away. The rule states that all attacking units for defending hex have to be within command range, and this guy is actually 4 hexes away. The command range is only 3. So let's roll. Roll to 1, so he's fully coordinated. There will be no maneuver combat, so we'll move on to the assault combat step. The first segment, the defender allocates and resolves air. The FWA player has 6 air points remaining, which he will allocate. That'll leave him with a 0. In defense of this hex, the PAVN player has a total of, let's check here, 4, 7, 10 steps adjacent to the target hex. So that means that he can conduct air defense fire. So let's go to the air defense table. He needs to roll 2 or less. And he rolled a 9, which is a clear miss. No air defense effect, so the FWA player can use all 6 points in his defensive bombardment. So let's go to the bombardment table. We'll be in the 6th column. I'm sorry, bombardment's down here. The 6th column, none of these apply. So let's roll. Roll to 1. In the 6th column, that is 4 divided by the train defense value of 2. So that's 2 losses for the PAVN player. The fatigue only applies for offensive bombardment, so we're not going to apply fatigue. So the PAVN player is going to lose 2 steps. So we're going to have to take 1 step from this hex and 1 step from this hex. And that gives the FWA player 2 victory points. All right, now that defensive bombardment has been conducted, we'll move on to the defender rolls first on the assault combat table. The defender has a total of 9 defense strength. So we'll go to the assault table. We'll be rolling in the 9 column. None of these modifiers are going to apply. Just a straight roll. Rolled an 8. An 8 in the 9 column is no effect. Now it's the attacker's turn. The attacker rolls. The attacker is attacking with 4, 8. 8 total attack strength points. So we'll go to here. Let's see if any modifiers apply. No, 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 no. Yes, +1 for the light jungle, -1 for the special rule, net 0 with, how many did I say? 8 attack strength points. Rolled a 2 on the 8 column. 2 is 2, so the FWA player takes another 2 step losses. So each one of these units will take a step loss. And that means the PAVN player gets another 4 victory points. 2 points per step loss. Right, now, if units on both sides remain, both sides roll against the highest ER in their stack. So for the PAVN player, it's going to be a 4, and he succeeds, so he can assault again. For the FWA player, it's going to be a 5, and he does not succeed. So once again, the PAVN player is assaulting with 8 strength points total. And he's going to have, I don't know why I keep including the train effects. These don't apply the first turn. It's just going to be a -1 per special rule. There you go. 2 -1 is 1. And the 8 column, that's another 2 losses. So that's not good for the FWA player. And that is another 4 points for the PAVN player. Well, that certainly was not a good round for the FWA. Alright, since there are no defenders left in that hex, this combat round is over, and now we move on to the second player turn. So it's going to be the FWA player's turn. There are no reinforcements. He's not going to be moving. If these other 2 units had survived, I would move them into this hex, but they're gone. So we can get rid of this. I won't be declaring combat. I won't be doing... Maybe I will be doing offensive bombardment. No, I have nothing left for this turn. I'm down to 0. Alright, no combat reaction, no combat resolution phase. I'm not doing attack coordination, no maneuver, no assault combat. So that's the end of the FWA player's turn. We now move to game turn 2. So we can get rid of all these markers. Alright, reset the FWA air points. For this turn, the FWA player gets 15 air points. There are no fire markers on the map. There's no fatigue to be recovered, no headquarters being replaced. There's no reinforcements. And now the PAVN player is going to move. So in this hex here, we have 2 units, 2 stacking points with a total attack strength of 4. I think I'm going to move them. See, that's 3, 5. Here I have 2 units with a total attack strength of 4. I'm going to move them to here. I'm also going to move this unit, or these 2 units, into here. So I have 3.5 stacking points in this hex. I will move my headquarters unit. Let's see, that's 3, 6, and I'll move these 2 units here. I'll leave the mortar where it is. I really could have left the headquarters unit here because he'd still be able to trace a path to this unit without going through enemy zone of control. I'll leave the mortar unit where he is because he has a range of 3 and the target hex is only 2 hexes away. So that will be the end of the movement phase. Combat declaration. Well, just to be on the safe side, I have this hex with 3.5 stacking points and pretty powerful attack strength. So I think I'm just going to place 1 assault marker on this hex. So that's it for combat declaration. Offensive bombardment. I think I will take this opportunity to fire my mortar. So I'll place a target marker on the target hex. And I'll also place a first fire marker on my mortar. So looking at the bombardment table, none of these will apply, so I'm going to roll in the 2 column. Roll the 2, and that is a 1. Well, 1 divided by the train defense value of 2 is a fraction, so we'll drop that. However, the FWA player suffers a fatigue. So one of these units in this hex must become fatigued. They both have an attack strength of 1 and a defense strength of 1, so it doesn't really matter. So I will place a fatigue marker, and we'll move that down. Alright, the significance of this is that a fatigued unit cannot conduct combat except for defensive combat. So I can still use the 1 of this fatigued unit, but if he were assaulting, actually he wouldn't be able to assault. I wouldn't be able to use him for offensive assaulting. So that was a pretty good move for the PAVN player. Alright, let's see what's next. That was offensive bombardment. Combat reaction, there was none. Combat resolution. Alright, attack coordination. The only hex doing any attacking is this hex right here. He is within the command range of the headquarters unit, so he can roll against the efficiency rating of the headquarters, which is a 6. And he made it, so his attack is fully coordinated. Alright, no maneuver combat, assault combat. Defender allocates and resolves air and or artillery. Well, this is looking pretty bleak for the FWA players, so I think what I'm going to do is allocate all 15 points of air to defend this hex. The defender does not have 16 or more steps here, so he can't conduct air defense fire. Alright, so going to the bombardment table, I'll be rolling on the 15 column. None of these die roll modifiers apply. I rolled a 9. That's a 1. 1 divided by 2 is a fraction. Drop all fractions, so all 15 points have been squandered with no effect. Next, the defender rolls on the assault combat table. The defender only has 2 defense strength points. So going to the assault table, let's see if anything applies. No leader. The attack is not uncoordinated. There's no patrol marker. But we have greater than 0 but less than 50% of steps fatigue. Well, let's see how many steps we have in the hex. We have 2 steps in the hex, and one of them is fatigued. So that's actually 50%. So greater than or equal to 50% of steps fatigued, we have to add 2 to our die roll. Alright, so on the 2 column, roll a 4, plus 2 is 6. That is no effect. Now the attacker rolls in the assault combat table, and the attacker has 2, 4, 7, 11 points of attack strength. So we'll go to the assault table. Let's see if anything applies here. Now this is the second turn, so this -1 DRM is not going to apply. And this turn also the terrain DRMs will apply. So there's no leader, no hid movement, no ambush. We're not attacking more than 2 hexes. There's no armor. The attack is not uncoordinated. We have to add 1 for terrain effects. So how many did I say? 2, 4, 7, 11. So we'll be on the 11 column, and we're going to add 1 for terrain effects. 6 plus 1 is 7. There's 1. So the FWA player suffers 1 step loss. I'll get rid of the fatigue guy. I'll get rid of his fatigue marker also. And that leaves 1 unit in the hex. If units on both sides remain, both sides roll against the highest ER in their stack. For the PAVN, that's going to be a 6. and they made it again. For the FWA, it's going to be a 5. And once again, they failed their efficiency check roll. So just the PAVN will be attacking again with 11 points. And a +1 for terrain. So on the 11 column, they roll a 1. +1 is a 2. And that's 2 step losses. So that means the FWA player has been eliminated. And that is another 4 points for the PAVN player. Well, that was not good for the FWA. Let's total up the victory points. Well, clearly the PAVN player has more than enough victory points, and actually since we eliminate all the units, all these units must advance. Any assaulting units must advance into a hex where no defenders are left. Alright, so the PAVN player has 16 victory points plus the additional 3 for being in LZ Albany versus the FWA's 2. So clearly the PAVN have taken the day this time around. Alright, if you see that I've made any mistakes or I could have done something differently or better, please let me know in the comments. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time. Bye.